In a world ravaged by an unforgiving pandemic, civilization as we knew it crumbled into dust. The once bustling cities now stand as silent monuments to humanity's hubris, their empty streets echoing with the whispers of a forgotten past. Amidst this desolate landscape, we find Ana and Pedro, siblings torn apart by fate and the harsh realities of survival. 10 years have passed since they last saw each other, a decade that might as well be an eternity in this new world order. Ana, now a strong and resourceful young woman, leads a small community of survivors, her heart hardened by years of struggle and loss. Each day is a battle against the elements, dwindling resources, and the constant threat of hostile groups. Her eyes, once bright with childhood innocence, now carry the weight of countless difficult decisions and the lives that depend on her leadership. Despite the hardships, Ana has managed to create a semblance of stability for her people, teaching them to cultivate the barren land and defend against the dangers that lurk in the shadows of their ruined world. Pedro, on the other hand, wanders the wasteland, a solitary figure haunted by the ghosts of his past decisions. The memory of abandoning his younger sister in a moment of panic and self-preservation has eaten away at his soul, driving him to seek redemption in a world that offers little forgiveness. He's become a skilled survivor, his body bearing the scars of countless battles and near misses, but the emotional wounds run far deeper. In his journey across the desolate landscape, Pedro has witnessed both the depths of human cruelty and rare moments of kindness, each encounter shaping his resolve to find Ana and make amends. The air is thick with tension and the ever-present threat of danger, as both Ana and Pedro navigate a world where trust is a luxury and survival is the only currency that matters. Toxic storms sweep across the land, forcing survivors to take shelter or risk a painful death. Resources are scarce, and competition for them often turns violent. In this harsh reality, alliances are fragile, and betrayal is always just around the corner. But in this bleak existence, a glimmer of hope emerges, the possibility of reunion, of redemption. Rumors begin to circulate of a community led by a young woman who bears a striking resemblance to Pedro's long-lost sister. Meanwhile, Ana's group faces a critical shortage of supplies, forcing them to consider a perilous journey in search of a new home. As fate would have it, their paths are set on a collision course. As we delve into their stories, we're compelled to ask, in a world stripped of its humanity, can the bonds of family survive? What price must one pay for forgiveness? And in the face of overwhelming odds, can love and compassion still find a way to thrive? The choices Ana and Pedro have made over the past decade have shaped them into the survivors they are today, but will those same choices ultimately keep them apart? The stage is set for a gripping tale of survival, reconciliation, and the indomitable human spirit. Will Ana and Pedro find their way back to each other? Or will the harsh realities of their post-apocalyptic world keep them forever apart? As they navigate treacherous landscapes and confront their own demons, both siblings will be tested in ways they never imagined. Their journey is not just one of physical survival, but of emotional endurance and the search for meaning in a world that seems devoid of hope. In this unforgiving new reality, every decision carries weight, and the consequences of past actions echo through time. Ana must grapple with the responsibility of leadership and the toll it takes on her humanity, while Pedro seeks to redefine himself beyond his past mistakes. Both must confront the question, in a world where survival often comes at the cost of one's moral compass, how does one hold on to their humanity? As the story unfolds, we are invited to reflect on our own capacity for resilience, forgiveness, and hope in the face of adversity. What would we do if faced with the same impossible choices? How far would we go to protect those we love, and at what point does survival cease to be enough? In Ana and Pedro's journey, we see reflections of our own struggles and the universal human desire for connection and redemption. 10 years ago, the world as we knew it ended. In the chaos that followed, two young siblings faced a moment that would define their lives. Pedro, 18 and terrified, made a choice that would haunt him for a decade. As panic spread and society collapsed, he abandoned his 12-year-old sister Ana, convincing himself it was the only way to survive. The memory of her desperate cries as he ran still echoes in his nightmares. Ana, left alone in a world gone mad, was fortunate. A group of survivors found her, huddled and afraid, and took her into their community. Over the years, this makeshift family nurtured her, teaching her the skills needed to thrive in this harsh new reality. She learned to cultivate crops in unforgiving soil, to defend against marauders, and to lead with both compassion and strength. Yet beneath her hardened exterior, the pain of abandonment lingered, a constant reminder of the brother who chose himself over her. Pedro's path led him into darkness. He joined a group of scavengers, telling himself it was necessary to survive. For years, he lived by taking from others, each act of violence chipping away at his humanity. But the guilt never left him. It whispered in quiet moments, grew louder with each passing year, until it became a roar he could no longer ignore. One night, unable to bear the weight of his actions, Pedro walked away from the scavengers, determined to find a way to atone for his sins. As the years passed, Ana rose to become a leader in her community. Her wisdom beyond her years and her unwavering resolve made her indispensable. She oversaw the planting of crops, organized defenses, and made the hard decisions necessary for survival. But leadership came at a cost. Each life lost under her watch, each difficult choice, added to the burden she carried. In quiet moments, she wondered about Pedro, torn between anger at his betrayal and a deep, unspoken longing to see him again. Pedro, meanwhile, wandered the wastelands. He used his survival skills to help those in need, each act of kindness a small step towards redemption. He never stayed in one place long, driven by restlessness and the fear of forming connections he might lose. But whispers of a community led by a young woman who matched Ana's description reached his ears, igniting a spark of hope he thought long extinguished. As their 10th year apart drew to a close, both Ana and Pedro stood at crossroads. Ana's community faced dwindling resources, forcing them to consider a dangerous migration. Pedro grappled with the decision to seek out the sister he had wronged, unsure if he deserved forgiveness or if Ana would even want to see him. The world they navigated was unforgiving. Toxic storms swept across barren landscapes, resources were scarce, and danger lurked around every corner. Trust was a rare commodity, often paid for in blood. Yet amidst the desolation, pockets of humanity persisted, reminders that even in the darkest times, hope could survive. As their paths began to converge, questions lingered. Could the bond between siblings survive a decade of separation and trauma? Was redemption possible in a world that often demanded compromise just to survive? And if they did reunite, would they recognize the people they had become? The morning sun rose over Ana's community, casting long shadows across the makeshift buildings and carefully tended fields. Ana stood at the edge of their settlement, her eyes scanning the horizon. The signs were unmistakable, their once fertile land was failing. Crops withered in the increasingly toxic soil, and water sources were drying up. The decision she had been dreading could no longer be postponed. They had to move. Gathering her people, Ana broke the news. Fear and uncertainty rippled through the crowd, but her calm resolve steadied them. "We've overcome every challenge thrown our way," she reminded them. "This is just another test of our strength and unity." As she spoke, Ana felt the weight of their trust, their lives, on her shoulders. It was a burden she had carried for years, one that had shaped her from a scared young girl into the leader she now was. Preparations for the journey began immediately. Every scrap of food, every drop of clean water, every useful tool had to be accounted for and packed. Anna worked tirelessly, coordinating teams, settling disputes, and planning their route. In quiet moments, she pored over old maps, searching for any hint of a suitable new home. The world outside their walls was a dangerous unknown, filled with hostile groups and environmental hazards. Each potential path carried its own risks. As the day of departure dawned, Anna addressed her people one last time. "The road ahead is uncertain," she admitted, "but we face it together. Our strength lies not in these walls or fields, but in each other." With a final look at the only home many of them had known for a decade, they set out into the wasteland. The journey proved even more perilous than Anna had anticipated. Toxic storms forced them to seek shelter in crumbling buildings, huddling together as poisonous winds howled outside. Food and water grew scarce, and Anna had to make difficult decisions about rationing. She saw the toll it took on her people, the growing weariness, the fraying tempers, and pushed herself harder, often going without so others could have more. Their path took them through the ruins of old cities, once great metropolises now reduced to eerie, silent monuments of the past. Anna couldn't help but wonder about the lives lived here, the dreams and aspirations now turned to dust. It was a stark reminder of all they had lost, and what they fought to preserve. Encounters with other survivor groups were tense. Some were desperate for resources and saw Anna's well-organized group as a target. Others offered alliances, but Anna had learned the hard way that trust came at a high price in this new world. She navigated these interactions carefully, always putting the safety of her people first. As weeks turned into months, the strain began to show. Injuries and illness took their toll. Doubts crept in, whispers questioning Anna's leadership and the wisdom of their journey. Anna felt the weight of every setback, every loss. At night, when the others slept, she allowed herself moments of vulnerability, questioning if she was truly fit to lead them to safety. It was during one of these dark nights that Anna's resolve was truly tested. A group of scavengers, more numerous and better armed than any they had encountered before, ambushed them. The ensuing battle was chaotic and brutal. Anna found herself in the thick of the fight, defending her people with a ferocity that surprised even her. As the tide of battle turned against them, Anna faced a harrowing choice: stand and fight, potentially sacrificing everything, or attempt a risky escape that might save some but doom others. In that moment of crisis, as Anna weighed impossible options, fate intervened in a way she could never have anticipated. The choice she would make, and its consequences, would change everything, not just for her community, but for the brother she had long thought lost. The harsh sun beat down on Pedro as he trudged across the barren landscape. Years of wandering had etched deep lines into his face, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for threats. He'd long ago lost count of the days since he'd left the scavengers, but the weight of his past actions still hung heavy on his shoulders. Rumors of a community led by a young woman who matched Anna's description had reached his ears in a ramshackle trading post. The mere possibility that his sister might be alive had ignited a spark of hope in Pedro's heart, a feeling so foreign it was almost painful. But hope was a dangerous thing in this world, and Pedro knew better than most how cruelly it could be snuffed out. Still, he couldn't ignore the pull. Each step took him closer to a potential reunion, but also to a confrontation with his greatest shame. The memory of abandoning Anna haunted his dreams, her frightened face etched into his mind. What right did he have to seek her out now, after all these years? Would she even want to see him? These questions tortured Pedro as he pressed on. His journey was fraught with danger. The wastelands were home to desperate survivors and violent gangs. Pedro's years with the scavengers had honed his survival skills, but they had also taught him the depths of human cruelty. He moved cautiously, avoiding populated areas when possible and relying on stealth when confrontation couldn't be avoided. One night, huddled in the ruins of an old gas station, Pedro encountered a family on the brink of starvation. Despite his own dwindling supplies, he shared what he could. The gratitude in their eyes stirred something in him, a reminder of the person he once was, before survival had hardened him. It was moments like these that fueled his quest for redemption. As Pedro drew closer to the rumored location of Ana's community, he found himself crossing paths with his old gang of scavengers. The encounter was tense, fraught with the potential for violence. Pedro's former comrades sneered at what they saw as his weakness, his abandonment of their ruthless way of life. In that moment, Pedro realized how far he'd come from the frightened young man who had once joined them. The confrontation turned violent, and Pedro found himself fighting for his life against those he once called allies. The battle was brutal, bringing back memories of countless raids and the lives he'd taken in the name of survival. But this time, Pedro fought with a different purpose, not just to survive, but to have a chance at redemption, to maybe, just maybe, see his sister again. Battered and exhausted, Pedro emerged victorious but deeply shaken. The encounter had forced him to confront the darkest parts of his past, the choices that had led him down this lonely path. As he tended to his wounds, Pedro grappled with the fear that he might be beyond forgiveness, that the brother Ana knew was truly gone. Yet he pressed on, driven by a mix of hope and desperation. The landscape grew more treacherous, with toxic storms forcing him to take shelter in decaying buildings and radiation zones requiring careful navigation. Each obstacle seemed like a test, as if the very world was questioning his resolve, his right to seek redemption. As Pedro neared his destination, he heard distant sounds of conflict. His heart raced as he recognized the tactics of a scavenger attack, the same methods he had once employed. Without hesitation, he rushed towards the battle, driven by an instinct he couldn't quite name. Was it the old pull of violence, or something more, a chance to finally do the right thing? What Pedro saw as he crested the hill would change everything. In the chaos of battle, amidst a group of defenders fighting desperately against overwhelming odds, he caught a glimpse of a face he had both longed for and dreaded seeing for 10 long years. Ana was there, leading her people with a fierce determination. In that moment, all of Pedro's carefully rehearsed words, all his agonizing over whether he deserved forgiveness, fell away. There was only one choice: to fight, to protect, to try, in this one desperate moment, to be the brother he should have been all along. Pedro plunged into the fray, his skills honed by years in the wasteland now turned to a nobler purpose. But as he fought his way towards Ana, he couldn't help but wonder, would she recognize him? And more importantly, when the dust settled, would she accept the man he had become? The clash of metal and cries of battle filled the air as Pedro fought his way through the chaos. His heart pounded, not from exertion, but from the glimpse he'd caught of Ana. She was there, in the thick of the fight, a fierce leader rallying her people against the onslaught of scavengers. The sight of her, so changed, yet unmistakably his sister, nearly stopped him in his tracks. Ana, unaware of Pedro's presence, was focused solely on protecting her community. She barked orders, coordinated defenses, and fought with a determination born from years of hardship and leadership. The scavengers, once Pedro's companions, pressed their attack with brutal efficiency. They outnumbered Ana's group, and their superior weapons were slowly turning the tide. As Pedro cut through the battle, his skills honed by years in the wasteland now turned against his former allies. He saw Ana cornered by 2 attackers. Without hesitation, he leapt to her defense, his makeshift blade flashing in the harsh sunlight. The scavengers, caught off guard by this new threat, fell quickly to Pedro's desperate assault. For a moment, the siblings stood face to face, the sounds of battle fading to a distant roar. Anna's eyes widened in disbelief, a mix of emotions flashing across her face: shock, anger, confusion, and something deeper, more vulnerable. Pedro, his rehearsed words forgotten, could only stare back, his heart in his throat. The moment was shattered by a renewed attack. Without a word, Anna and Pedro fell into a rhythm, fighting back to back as if the decade apart had never happened. Their movements were synchronized, each covering the other's blind spots, a dance of survival honed by years of individual struggle now perfectly in tune. As the tide of battle turned, the remaining scavengers retreated, leaving behind a scene of destruction and wary victory. The immediate danger past, Anna and Pedro once again faced each other, the weight of 10 years of separation hanging between them. "Anna," Pedro began, his voice hoarse with emotion. But Anna cut him off, her voice cold and controlled. "Secure the perimeter. Check for wounded. We'll talk later." Her eyes, so familiar yet so changed, bore into Pedro with an intensity that made him flinch. Without waiting for a response, she turned to tend to her injured people, leaving Pedro standing alone amidst the aftermath of the battle. The following hours were a blur of activity. Pedro, desperate to prove himself useful, threw himself into the tasks of treating the wounded and reinforcing defenses. He felt the wary eyes of Anna's community on him, their whispers a constant reminder that he was an outsider, an unknown variable in their carefully balanced world. As night fell, Anna finally approached Pedro. She led him to a quiet corner of their makeshift camp, away from prying eyes and ears. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, her gaze searching, assessing. Pedro stood still under her scrutiny, afraid that any movement might shatter this fragile moment. "Why are you here?" Anna finally asked, her voice a mix of exhaustion and carefully controlled emotion. Pedro swallowed hard, all his practiced explanations deserting him. "I've been looking for you," he said simply. "For years. I needed to find you. To explain. To apologize." Anna's laugh was bitter, tinged with a decade of pain. "Apologize? Do you think that's enough? Do you have any idea what I've been through? What I've had to become?" The words hit Pedro like physical blows. He had imagined this reunion countless times, but the reality of Anna's anger, her hurt, was overwhelming. "I know I can't undo what I did," he said softly. "I was a coward. I've spent every day since then trying to find a way to make it right." Anna's composure cracked, just for a moment, revealing the vulnerability beneath her hardened exterior. "You left me," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I was alone, and scared, and you just left." The weight of those words hung between them, a chasm of hurt and lost years that seemed impossible to bridge. Yet in that moment of raw honesty, something shifted. The anger in Anna's eyes mixed with a glimmer of the sister Pedro remembered, the little girl who had once looked up to him with love and trust. As they stood there, surrounded by the remnants of the world they had lost and the harsh reality of the one they now inhabited, both Anna and Pedro faced a choice. Could the bonds of family, stretched thin by time and trauma, still hold? Was there a path forward, or would the pain of the past prove too much to overcome? The night deepened around them, and in the distance, the sounds of their battered but resilient community preparing for another day of survival filled the air. Whatever decision they made now would shape not just their own futures, but the lives of all those who depended on Anna's leadership and could benefit from Pedro's hard-won skills. In this moment of truth, what would they choose? The silence stretched between Anna and Pedro, heavy with unspoken words and years of separation. Finally, Anna broke the tension, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to hate you for so long," she admitted. "Some days, I think I did." Pedro nodded, accepting her words without defense. "I wouldn't blame you if you still did," he replied softly. Anna's eyes met his, searching. "But hate, it's exhausting. And now, seeing you here, risking your life for people you don't even know." She trailed off, struggling to articulate the conflicting emotions warring within her. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Pedro said. "I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted leaving you. Everything I've done since then has been trying to become someone worthy of being your brother again." A long moment passed as Anna processed his words. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I can't forget what happened," she said. "But maybe we can start building something new. My people need all the help they can get, and you've proven you can fight." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Pedro felt a weight lift from his shoulders, even as a new one settled, the responsibility to prove himself worthy of this second chance. The next days were a whirlwind of activity. Anna's community was still reeling from the attack and facing the pressing need to find a new home. Pedro threw himself into the work, using his survival skills to help secure their temporary camp and scout for potential safe locations. Slowly, warily, the other survivors began to accept Pedro's presence. His knowledge of scavenger tactics proved invaluable in improving their defenses. During long nights on watch, he shared stories of his travels, painting a picture of the world beyond their limited experience. Some, especially the younger members of the group, began to look at him with a mix of curiosity and cautious admiration. Anna watched all of this with guarded eyes. She saw glimpses of the brother she remembered, his quick wit, his protective instincts, but they were tempered by a new maturity, a depth of experience that matched her own. Late one night, as they pored over maps together, planning their journey to a promising new location, Anna found herself opening up about the challenges of leadership, the weight of responsibility she carried. To her surprise, Pedro listened without judgment, offering insights from his own experiences. For the first time in years, Anna felt the burden of command lighten, if only slightly. It was a reminder of what it meant to have family, to not stand alone. As the community prepared for their migration, Pedro's role grew. His years of navigating the wasteland made him an invaluable guide. He worked tirelessly, pushing himself to prove his worth not just to Anna, but to everyone who now depended on him. The journey was arduous, filled with dangers both expected and unforeseen. Toxic storms forced them to seek shelter in treacherous ruins. Dwindling supplies led to tense rationing decisions. More than once, they faced hostile groups, each encounter a grim reminder of the world they inhabited. Through it all, Anna and Pedro's bond slowly reformed, tempered by shared hardship and a growing mutual respect. They found themselves finishing each other's sentences during strategy sessions, anticipating each other's moves during skirmishes. The years apart had changed them both, but the core of their connection remained. One night, halfway through their journey, Anna found Pedro sitting alone, staring at the stars. She sat beside him, the silence comfortable in a way it hadn't been since their reunion. "I used to dream about finding you," she said quietly. "I'd imagine all these scenarios, what I'd say, what I'd do." Pedro turned to her, his expression open and vulnerable. "And now?" Anna was quiet for a long moment. "Now? I'm glad you're here," she finally said. "I can't change the past, and neither can you. But maybe we can build a better future. Together." It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet. There were still hurts to heal, trust to rebuild. But as they sat there, under the vast expanse of the night sky, both Ana and Pedro felt a sense of hope they hadn't dared to embrace in years. The path ahead was still fraught with dangers and uncertainties. Finding and establishing a new home would test them and their people in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in a decade, they faced that future not as isolated survivors, but as family, scarred, changed, but together once more. As dawn broke on the horizon, signaling the start of another challenging day, Ana and Pedro stood side by side, ready to lead their people towards a new beginning. The world around them might be in ruins, but in each other, they had found something precious, a chance to rebuild not just a home, but the bonds that made life worth fighting for. The sun rose over a verdant valley, casting golden light on the bustling activity below. After months of grueling travel and countless obstacles, Ana and Pedro's group had finally found their new home. The abandoned research facility they'd discovered nestled in the mountains offered both shelter and the promise of sustainable resources. As the community set about transforming this place into a true sanctuary, the air hummed with a cautious optimism that many hadn't felt in years. Ana stood atop a hill overlooking their fledgling settlement, her eyes taking in the progress they'd made in just a few short weeks. Solar panels glinted in the morning light, jury-rigged from scavenged materials. The first crops were sprouting in carefully tended plots, a testament to the skills her people had honed over years of hardship. In the distance, she could see Pedro leading a small team on a perimeter check, his watchful gaze scanning for any signs of threat. As she watched her brother, Ana reflected on the journey that had brought them here, not just the physical distance traveled, but the emotional terrain they'd navigated. The initial wariness and hurt had slowly given way to a tentative trust, forged in the crucible of shared challenges and mutual reliance. There were still moments of tension, old wounds that hadn't fully healed, but with each passing day, the siblings found themselves rediscovering the bond they'd once shared. Pedro finished his rounds and made his way up the hill to join Ana. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, surveying the fruits of their collective labor. "Did you ever think we'd find a place like this?" Pedro asked, his voice tinged with wonder. Ana shook her head. "Honestly? There were days I wasn't sure we'd survive the journey at all." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "We wouldn't have made it without you, you know." Pedro's face flushed slightly at the praise. "I'm just glad I could help," he said softly. "That I got the chance to try and make things right." Ana reached out and squeezed his arm, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just months ago. "You've done more than that," she said. "You've given these people hope. Given me hope." As they stood there, overlooking the beginnings of their new life, both siblings felt the weight of the past decade, the pain, the loneliness, the struggle for survival, begin to lift. It wasn't gone entirely, those experiences had shaped them into the people they were now. But for the first time in years, the future seemed to hold more promise than peril. "So what now?" Pedro asked, his gaze sweeping over the busy settlement below. Ana's lips curved into a small smile. "Now we build," she said simply. "Not just walls and farms, but a real community. A place where people can do more than just survive, where they can live." As if on cue, a peal of children's laughter drifted up from the valley. It was a sound that had become increasingly common in recent days, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. Even in the face of unimaginable hardship, people found reasons to hope, to connect, to look towards tomorrow. "It won't be easy," Pedro cautioned, ever mindful of the dangers that still lurked in the world beyond their sanctuary. Ana nodded, her expression determined. "Nothing worth doing ever is," she replied. "But we've come this far. Together, I think we can face whatever comes next." As they made their way back down to the settlement, ready to tackle another day of challenges and triumphs. Both Ana and Pedro felt a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. They had been given a second chance, not just to reconnect as siblings, but to help forge a future where the bonds of family and community could flourish once more. The world might still be in ruins, but here, in this hidden valley, something precious was taking root. It was more than just a new beginning for Ana and Pedro. It was a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, a beacon of hope in a world that desperately needed it. As they reached the heart of the settlement, greeted by the smiles and nods of their people, Ana and Pedro exchanged a look of quiet understanding. The road ahead would not be easy, but they would face it as they had faced every challenge since their reunion, side by side, stronger together than they ever were apart. The story of their survival and reconciliation was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But with each passing day, with every small victory and shared burden, Ana and Pedro were writing a new chapter, not just for themselves, but for all those who looked to them for leadership and hope. In this new world they were building, forged from the ashes of the old, the possibilities seemed endless. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, bathing their fledgling home in warm light, Ana and Pedro stood ready to embrace whatever the future might hold, united once more as family.